Chosen one, before anything else, I need you to release something. The quiet guilt you have been carrying this week, the feeling that heaven has been closer to other people than to you, the sense that maybe somewhere along the way you stopped being someone that signs are sent to. Let that go before this begins, because what I am about to tell you is the direct opposite of that story. God sent you 7 signs this week, not 2, not a vague feeling, 7 specific, deliberately crafted, precisely timed. They moved through your days like dispatches from a realm that does not operate on your calendar or honor your busyness. They arrived in the texture of ordinary moments, in a pause you filled with noise, in a conversation you did not fully enter, in a stillness your body felt, but your mind refused to sit in. You were not ignoring them. You were not faithless. You were running on a frequency that the world trained you to live on. And on that frequency, the language of heaven becomes hard to hear. That is not a failure, that is a fact. And it is precisely why this message exists. God does not send 7 signs to someone ordinary. He does not exhaust his pursuit on people. He has not set apart. The volume of his reaching tells you everything about the weight of what he is trying to give you. We are going to count them together. And by the 7th, nothing about your ordinary days will look ordinary again. Before I name the first sign, I need to tell you something about the world you have been living in. Not the version you present, the real one. Think about this past week. You woke up and before your eyes had fully adjusted to the light, the demands were already there. Messages that needed replies, responsibilities that needed managing, people who needed something from you. And you got up and handled it, because that is what you do. That is what you have always done. By the middle of most days this week, you were operating on a kind of autopilot that the people around you would have mistaken for being fine. And maybe, part of you, convinced yourself that you were fine. But underneath all the managing, underneath the pace, there was something quieter trying to get your attention. A pull, a whisper, a moment of stillness that kept surfacing and kept getting pushed back under by the next thing on the list. You were not spiritually absent. You were simply running too fast for the sacred to catch you. Here is something that most people are never told. Every child carries a natural inner openness, a kind of receiver that is always on. You have seen it. Children notice things. Adults walk straight past. They feel the atmosphere of a room the moment they enter it. They hear what is not being said. They are not more spiritual than adults. They are simply running on a frequency that the world has not yet had time to suppress. Scientists who study the brain have a name for this frequency. It is the gamma state, the brainwave pattern tied to heightened awareness, to sharp intuition, to clarity that feels almost miraculous. And the research that has come out of institutions like MIT and Harvard tells a consistent story. This frequency begins to decline in most people around the age of 7, not because of illness. Because of the environment, because of the noise, the pressure, the survival mode that modern life requires. The chosen one is not exempt from this. In fact, because you were born with a higher natural level of this frequency than most people around you, you feel the gap more. The distance between who you were as a child, wide open and quick to receive, and who you have had to become as an adult, who fights for every moment of stillness. That gap is real. And it is the reason 6 signs moved through your week and left without being recognized. But here is what changes today. I am going to name all 7 signs. I am going to tell you exactly what each one was, why it arrived the way it did, and what was being communicated through it. I am also going to give you something practical, a way to recalibrate your inner receiver so these signs are never invisible to you again. And by the time we reach the 7th sign, and I am asking you to stay with me until we get there, because the 7th one will reframe everything that came before it, you will not leave this the same way you arrived. Everything I cover before that seventh sign is preparation for it. Stay until the end. Now, the first sign. It arrived in the dark. Somewhere this week, maybe more than once, you woke between 2 and 4 in the morning with no clear reason, no sound outside, no alarm. Just you, suddenly alert, in the middle of the night, with a kind of wakefulness that did not belong to that hour. Maybe your mind went straight to the list. Maybe anxiety moved in the moment your eyes opened. Maybe you reached for your phone just to fill the silence. Most people do one of those three things, and most people go back to sleep having received nothing. But that waking was not random. In the ancient world, the hours between midnight and dawn were understood as the watch hours, the time when the space between the visible and invisible was thinnest, when the communication of heaven was most likely to come through without interference. Elijah understood this from personal experience. He had run himself into complete exhaustion, spiritually emptied, physically collapsed, sitting under a tree, asking to be released from the weight of his own calling. And in that exact state, something reached him, twice, not with thunder, not with fire, with something as quiet and ordinary as a hand on the shoulder and an offering of bread. The most divine contact of that season came to him not at his strongest. It came when he had nothing left. What you experienced in those waking hours this week was not a malfunction of your sleep. Your body was not broken. What felt like restlessness was actually reception. What felt like an interrupted sleep pattern was actually a window being opened into a frequency you cannot access, while the noise of your waking life is turned all the way up. In the silence of the night, with your defenses down and your mental lists momentarily suspended, your spirit was being addressed. The question is, what do you do with it now? I want to give you something called the stillness protocol. It is simple. The next time you wake in those hours, before you reach for your phone, before you start the mental inventory, do one thing. Lie still and ask a single question, silently or quietly out loud. What is it? Just those 3 words. What is it? Then wait. Not for a voice, not for a vision, for an impression, a single word, or an image, or a sense of direction that surfaces before your mind can manufacture an explanation for it. If something comes, hold it. Even one word, because what arrives in those hours is not your anxiety speaking. It is something far older and far more specific to you. The ones God prepares most deeply are prepared in secret before the assignment ever becomes visible. The waking in the night was not a disruption. It was a preparation being delivered to a receiver that could only be opened in the dark. The second sign was harder to name than the first, because this one did not happen in the quiet. It happened in the middle of your ordinary life, in conversations you have had 100 times, in rooms you have known for years, in the company of people who should have felt familiar. This week, something shifted in how certain people and certain spaces felt to you. People you used to be around without much thought started feeling heavy. Conversations that used to pass without friction started leaving you drained in a way that was hard to explain. Environments that were once comfortable started feeling like they no longer fit the shape of who you are right now. And, if you are honest, part of you felt guilty about it, like something was wrong with you, like you were becoming cold, like you were growing distant in a way that might be selfish or spiritually arrogant, or some kind of warning sign about who you were becoming. I need to say this clearly. Nothing is wrong with you. What is actually happening is that your discernment is increasing. Your capacity to sense what is life-giving and what is quietly draining that sensitivity is not malfunctioning. It is activating. And it is activating because you are being prepared for something that requires clarity, not compromise. There is a word in ancient Hebrew that most people read as simply meaning to see, but when you go back to the original language, you find two entirely different words doing two entirely different kinds of work. The word ra means to look, to notice what is in front of you, to register what is visible. But the word nabat means something deeper. It means to look with understanding, to perceive the meaning that lives underneath the surface of what you are seeing. Most people live their entire lives in Ra. They see what is in front of them, but the chosen one is being called into Nabat, into seeing what is actually there, behind the familiar, underneath the comfortable. The reason certain people and spaces began draining you this week is that you are being calibrated to a new frequency, and at that frequency, not every voice belongs in the same position it has always held. Samuel did not recognize the voice of God the first time it called him. He heard something in the night and ran to a familiar person, assuming the familiar was where the message was coming from. It took 3 times, and the guidance of someone wiser, before he understood, this is not the voice you know. This is a new voice, asking you to enter a new level of sensitivity that will change everything. What called Samuel did not sound supernatural. It sounded exactly like something ordinary, and it was asking him to reorganize his entire life around a truth he had not yet received. Your draining shift this week is your version of that moment. Now, there is something that comes with this sign that almost nobody talks about. Because when you begin pulling back, when you begin protecting your energy, when you begin being less available to the people and environments that once had open access to you, guilt arrives. It is heavy. It makes you question whether you are abandoning people who need you, whether you are becoming someone unrecognizable, whether the distance you feel is something God is disappointed in. So let me speak to that guilt directly. You are allowed to outgrow. You are allowed to pull back from what drains you without offering anyone an explanation. You are allowed to protect what is being built inside you, even when the people around you cannot yet see what is being built. The distance is not rejection. The boundary is not betrayal. The silence is not cruelty. It is discernment, and discernment is a sign. The first 2 signs arrived in your body and in your relationships. The next 2 go deeper into the language. God speaks when he needs to reach you through your own mind and through what felt like his own absence. The 3rd sign did not arrive as a feeling. It arrived as a thought. And the reason it was so easy to dismiss is because it came dressed in something that looked exactly like your own mind, just running loose. This week, there was a thought that kept coming back. Not an anxious spiral, not the replay of something that went wrong. Something different from that, more like a direction, a specific idea, a person, a calling, a particular path that kept rising to the surface of your awareness and then getting pushed back down by the weight of whatever needed your attention next. Maybe you told yourself it was wishful thinking. Maybe you decided it was a distraction from the real responsibilities in front of you. Maybe you made a quiet promise to think about it when things settled down, and things, as they always do, refused to settle down. So, the thought came back. Again. Quietly. Persistent. And you kept moving past it. Here is what I need you to understand about the way God speaks through the mind. Anxious thoughts have a very specific signature. They spiral, they shrink, they pull you toward fear and away from clarity. They revisit the same painful territory with no new information and no new direction. But the impressions God places in the mind have an entirely different texture. They return, yes, but they do not spiral. They point, consistently, in one direction. Even when you try to reason them away, even when you replace them with something more practical, they come back pointing at the same thing they pointed at before. The thought that kept visiting you this week was not your imagination running out of things to do. It was a message that refuses to expire. I want to give you something that I call the 3-question discernment test. When a thought keeps returning, run it through these 3 questions. The first, does this thought connect to something larger than my current comfort? Not something that makes life easier right now, but something that points toward a life that would require a bigger version of you to live. The second, does following this thought require courage? Not recklessness. Courage, the kind that comes with a weight in the chest, not a rush of adrenaline. The third, does it come back, even when you actively choose to set it aside and move on? If the answer to all 3 is yes, what you have been experiencing is not overthinking. It is a calling, knocking at the door of your awareness and waiting for you to stop long enough to answer it. Paul spent years moving in the direct opposite direction of his true assignment. He was educated, disciplined, certain that the path he was on was the right one. He had credentials and conviction, and the weight of tradition behind him. And yet there was something, a persistent, directional, quietly returning thing that kept confronting him with a truth he had not yet accepted. He could not reason it away indefinitely. The day it confronted him directly, everything he had built his life around had to be reorganized around a completely different center. The thought you have been dismissing this week may be the reorganizing truth of your next season, not a distraction. The direction, the ones God uses most significantly, rarely receive their assignments in one dramatic moment. They carry the thought for months, sometimes years, moving past it, returning to it, dismissing it, and finding it there again, until the day arrives when they are finally ready to say yes. Your repeated thought is not evidence of instability. It is evidence that your assignment has been patient with you, and that patience has a limit that is closer than you think. The 4th sign is the one that will challenge you most. Because everything I have named so far has been about God reaching the waking, the shifting, the returning thought. But this 4th sign looks, from the outside, like God going quiet. This week, there was a moment, maybe more than one, where your prayers felt like they were reaching a ceiling and going no further. Where the scripture that used to move something in you felt distant, like words on a page that had lost their warmth. Where the worship that once cracked something open in your chest felt flat and mechanical. Where you sat in the place where you have always been able to feel the connection, and the connection was simply not there. And something in you asked the question you did not want to ask. Have I drifted too far? Did I do something wrong? Is this what spiritual dryness feels like? And if so, how long does it last? I need to stop right here and say something carefully. That silence was not God's absence. Go back to Elijah, not to the fire on Mount Carmel, but to what came immediately after it, after the greatest display of divine power in his ministry, after the victory, after the unmistakable, dramatic, public confirmation that God was real and present and on his side. Within days, he was hiding, he was running. He sat under a tree and asked to be taken out of the assignment entirely. The most dramatic supernatural experience of his life was immediately followed by the deepest spiritual crisis of his life. And God did not respond to that crisis with more fire. He responded with silence, then with something small and nourishing, then with a question, not an accusation, a question that invited Elijah to go deeper than the dramatic. And then came the famous sequence. The wind came, and God was not in the wind. The earthquake came, and God was not in the earthquake. The fire came, and God was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice. The silence you experienced this week was not the wind. It was not the earthquake. It was not the fire. It was the space that came after all of those things. The space where the still, small voice was always waiting. the space you had to be brought to by the absence of everything louder. God uses silence as architecture. What he is building during the quiet seasons does not require your commentary or your activity. It requires your trust. The silence is not emptiness, it is construction, happening at a level that is below the threshold of what you can hear when the noise of your life is turned all the way up. I want to pause here and share something that I need you to receive before I continue. I hear the Spirit saying over someone watching this right now, the silence was not my distance, it was my preparation. Every prayer that felt like it hit a ceiling was a prayer I caught on the other side. I did not go anywhere. I was building what you were not yet ready to hold. The quiet was not a verdict on your worth. It was a sign that I was about to move in ways that required a foundation you were still being given. What do you do in a season of silence? There are 3 things I want to give you. I call them the wilderness waiting protocol. And they are the difference between a silence that becomes a breakthrough and a silence that becomes a stumbling block. The first is this: protect your confession. What you speak about yourself and your season during the quiet becomes the atmosphere you are creating for what is being built. Speak as though the silence is purposeful, because it is. Speak as though you are in preparation, not abandonment, because you are. The words you choose in the silence are not small things, they are structural. The second, stay expectant without becoming desperate. Expectation is an open posture, the spiritual equivalent of facing the door and leaving the light on. Desperation is a closed fist. It cannot receive what is trying to arrive. There is a difference between hunger and panic. Stay hungry. Release the panic. In your mind right now, wherever you are. Let your hands relax and open. That small physical act is the posture of what I am describing. The third, refuse to interpret the silence as a verdict. God's quiet seasons are not his evaluations of your worth. Every significant figure who carried a significant assignment walked through a period where the heavens seemed sealed. Not because they were forgotten, because what was coming required more foundation than what had already been laid. The silence was not the story ending, it was the story going deeper. Now, let me bring you to the midpoint. 4 signs have been named, and I want you to notice what they have in common. The waking in the night, the draining shift in your relationships, the thought that kept returning, the season where heaven went quiet. These are not the signs of someone losing their footing. These are the signs of someone whose inner life is being upgraded for something their outer life has not yet caught up to. And the next 3 signs are more personal than anything we have covered so far. The 5th is going to name something you have been carrying in silence, something you have not told many people, maybe anyone. The 6th is going to address a pressure that has been following you and pretending to be something other than what it is. And the 7th sign is the one I have been building toward from the beginning. The one that does not just add to the list, the one that recontextualizes every single sign that came before it, this entire week, and possibly the entire season of your life that led you to this moment. Stay. The 5th sign is the one I told you was personal, and I want you to think about someone specific before I say another word. Someone who used to occupy a certain place in your life, your week, your conversations, your plans. Someone whose presence used to feel like a given. And this week, something shifted. Maybe they pulled back without explanation. Maybe you pulled back without knowing exactly why. Maybe the distance arrived quietly, the way most significant things do not with a dramatic scene, but with a slow, undeniable cooling that both of you felt and neither of you named. That shift was not a breakdown, it was a sign. The people who are assigned to walk with you into your next season are not always the same people who walked with you through your last one. This is one of the most painful truths in the life of the chosen one, and I will not soften it more than it deserves to be softened, because softening it too much would be a disservice to what you are actually carrying. Some people came into your life for a chapter. Some people came for a lesson. And some people, and this is the hardest one, came to test whether you would love God's direction more than their company. Ruth understood this. She had lost her husband. She had lost the familiar structure of her life. She stood at a crossroads with her mother-in-law, and every practical reason pointed in one direction: go back to what you know, return to the comfortable. Stay where the path is clear and the faces are familiar. Her sister-in-law made that choice. There was nothing wrong with it. It was reasonable. But Ruth held to something that she could not fully explain and could not fully defend. She did not have a vision. She did not have a prophecy. She had a pull, a knowing that moved through her chest and told her that the life she was being called toward lived in the direction that made the least logical sense. And what looked like loss, the husband, the homeland, the familiarity, was the architecture of the most significant relationship of her life, the most meaningful assignment of her life, and a legacy that outlasted anything she could have built by staying where it was safe. The relationship that shifted this week is not a punishment. It is a preparation. Now, let me speak to something you have probably not said out loud, because when the pulling back happens, when you start protecting your energy, when you start being less available to the people and the spaces that used to have open access to you, guilt comes, heavy, specific, convincing. It tells you that you are becoming cold, that you are abandoning people who need you, that the version of you that is pulling away is a worse version, a more selfish version, a spiritually regressing version. And you listen to it, partly because you are a genuinely caring person, and partly because you were trained from very early on to believe that your value was directly connected to your availability. I need to say this as clearly as I know how to say it. You are allowed to outgrow. You are allowed to outgrow people, places, conversations, and versions of yourself that no longer carry what you are being asked to carry. You are allowed to protect what is being built inside you, even before it is finished, even before anyone else can see the shape of it. You are allowed to be less available without owing anyone the explanation for why. The boundary is not a betrayal. The distance is not a rejection. The silence is not cruelty. It is discernment in action, and discernment is a sign of maturity, not a sign of pride. Here is what I want you to do. In your mind, not out loud, think of the person or the space where you have felt the most guilt for pulling back. Hold that in your awareness for just a moment. Now, instead of asking yourself whether you were wrong to pull back, ask yourself this: what am I protecting? Not from them, what am I protecting for the next season? What is being built inside you right now that needs the energy you were giving away freely? Hold that for a moment. Whatever came to mind, that is what this season is for. That is what the clearing is making room for. The sixth sign is the one that has been disguising itself as stress. This week, there was a moment, maybe more than one, where the ground beneath your finances shifted. An unexpected bill, a number that did not add up the way it needed to, a door that looked like it was about to open and then did not, a sense that the provision you were counting on was thinner than you had realized. And the way your body responded to that, the tightening, the mental scramble, the quiet panic you managed in private while keeping your face arranged for everyone around you. That response felt like evidence that something was wrong. But here is what I need you to understand about the sixth sign. The sign was not that the provision tightened. The sign was the moment, the very specific moment when you had to decide whether you were going to collapse into fear or hold your footing in trust. That moment of decision is the sign, because what comes next requires someone who has already stood on shifting ground and chosen not to fall. There is a pattern that runs through the lives of every person who moved from where they were to where they were meant to be. Provision pressure came before provision breakthrough. Every single time, not sometimes, every time. The tightening is not the ceiling. The tightening is the pressure that comes just before the door opens, and it comes precisely because the enemy of your calling knows what is on the other side and would rather destabilize you now than deal with you when you have it. Here is a simple check I want you to run when provision tightens. I call it the resonance check. Ask yourself 2 questions. The first, am I reacting from fear or am I responding from faith? Fear contracts. Faith stays open. Fear makes decisions from the smallest version of the situation. Faith makes decisions from the largest possible truth. The second, what would the version of me who has already come through this do right now? Not the version of you who is in the middle of it. The version of you on the other side, looking back, who knows how it resolved? What would that person do today? Right now, wherever you are, take one breath that is slightly slower than the last one. That breath is the posture I am describing. Now, I have been building towards something throughout this entire message, and we have arrived at it. 6 signs have been named. And I want to take a moment to ask you something honest before we go any further. As we have gone through this list, the waking in the night, the draining shift, the repeated thought, the silence, the relationship that changed, the provision pressure, was there a part of you that kept waiting to feel something? Kept waiting for the confirmation to land fully, but something underneath kept saying, this is probably not really about me. I know that feeling. I know it well. And I want to name what it actually is before we go any further, because it is not what it pretends to be. It is not humility. Humility does not make itself smaller than the truth. What makes you dismiss good things when they are actually? For you, what makes you hold back from receiving the word that was sent specifically to find you is a pattern that formed a long time ago in a place that made a lot of sense at the time. The first time something good came close and then did not stay, your mind made a note. And then the second time, and then the third, and eventually the note became a policy. Do not fully believe the good thing is real until it has proven itself in ways that cannot be argued with. Because it hurts less to be cautious than to be wrong about something you wanted. That pattern is not who you are. It is what you built to protect yourself, and it has kept you safe. But it has also kept out things that were genuinely for you. And there is another layer underneath even that. Because some of you, watching this, are not just afraid of being wrong about the good thing. You are afraid of being right about it. Afraid of what it would actually mean if this really is your season. Afraid of the weight of what you would be expected to carry if you actually stepped into the fullness of what is being prepared for you. That fear is not weakness. I need you to hear that. The ones who moved into significant assignments without any fear did not do so because they were strong. They did so because they were unaware of the weight. Your healthy fear, your awareness of the magnitude of what you are stepping toward, that is not an obstacle to your calling. It is evidence that you are actually ready to hold it. You are allowed to be afraid and still move. You are allowed to believe without having it all figured out. You are allowed to say yes before you feel completely certain. You are allowed to receive this. And now that we have named the pattern, and now that you have been given permission to set it down, I want to tell you something that connects everything we have discussed to the science of what has actually been happening inside you. Because there is a reason, a real and documented reason, that the signs were hard to receive, and it is not spiritual. Or rather, it is spiritual, but it also has a name in neuroscience. When researchers at institutions like MIT and Harvard study the brainwaves of people in states of heightened intuition, heightened discernment, heightened perception, they consistently find the same thing. The frequency that is active in those states is called gamma. It is the brainwave pattern most associated with clarity, with insight, with the kind of knowing that arrives before the logic can catch up. It is also the frequency that children carry most naturally and most abundantly. A neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake spent 34 years studying what happens to this frequency as people move from childhood into adulthood. What he found was not a mystery. It was a mechanism. The frequency does not disappear because of age. It declines because of environment, because of the constant low-grade noise of survival mode, of overstimulation, of living in a world that has been designed, whether intentionally or not, to keep your brain running at a frequency that is useful for compliance and almost entirely unsuitable for receiving. The chosen one feels this more acutely than most people, not because they are weaker, but because they started with more. The gap between the receiver you were as a child, the one who noticed everything, felt everything, understood things before you had words for them, and the receiver you have had to become as an adult who fights for clarity. That gap is the gamma gap, the distance between what your brain was built to do and what the world has trained it to do instead. 6 signs moved through your week and left without being fully received. That is not a character failure, that is a frequency problem. And a frequency problem has a frequency solution. Dr. Lake compressed 34 years of research into an audio track, 7 minutes. Listened to with headphones, in stillness, it activates the gamma frequency through a process called brain entrainment, where the brain, when given the right audio signal, naturally synchronizes to the frequency of that signal. No meditation practice required. No years of training, no equipment that costs thousands of dollars. The biofeedback technology that specialists charge $300 an hour to administer what Dr. Lake found is that the same entrainment can be achieved in 7 minutes through a specific audio structure that his team developed and refined over decades. He called it the genius song, not because it makes you perform better on a test, because it recalibrates the exact frequency that you were born with, the frequency through which you once saw clearly, received easily, and moved through the world with a kind of knowing that felt almost magical, and that you have spent years trying to understand why it faded. It did not fade because you became less. It faded because the world is loud, and loud things suppress the frequency that heaven speaks on. Now, the usual cost for this technology in clinical settings runs to $300 per session, or upward of $7,000 for a home device. Dr. Lake made a decision that I respect, which is that the people who need this most are not always the people who can access it at those prices. The original price for the Genius Song is $49. For the people who come through this message, it is $39. That is not a promotional gesture. It is a decision Dr. Lake made about who he was building this for. One more thing I need to say carefully, because I have seen what happens when people go looking in the wrong places. There are sites that use the name. There are recordings that circulate on search engines and streaming platforms that carry the same title. They are not the same product. They do not carry the brain entrainment technology. They are audio files with music attached and nothing underneath. The only way to receive the genuine product with the full technology, the 4 bonus resources that come with it, and the complete money-back guarantee is through the link in the pinned comment below this video. Not through a search, not through a platform, only through that link. If what I have described resonates with you, if you recognize the gap between who you were and who you have had to become, and you feel something in you responding to the idea of reclaiming that frequency. The information is waiting for you in the pinned comment. Move toward it when your spirit says yes. And now, there is one sign left. The seventh sign is not what you expected. I know you have been waiting for it. You have been patient through 6 revelations, and you deserve to receive this one fully. So, I am going to ask you to slow down your breathing for just a moment before I say the next sentence. The seventh sign is this message. Not the content of it, the existence of it. The fact that you are here, at this exact moment, in this exact condition, having gone through the exact week that you went through, and something redirected your attention to this space at the precise moment when you had enough of the 6 previous signs active inside you to finally be able to receive what is being said here. That is not an accident. That is not an algorithm. That is a God who does not give up. Think about what I just named for a moment. The waking in the night was recalibrating your awareness. The draining shift was sharpening your discernment. The thought that kept returning was knocking on the door of your assignment. The silence was building what noise could never build. The relationship that reorganized was clearing the space for what is coming. The provision pressure was testing whether you would trust what you could not yet see. 6 movements, 1 direction, and at the end of every one of those signs, you were being led here to a moment where the veil would be lifted and the pattern would be named. What felt like a week of missing signs was actually a week of being prepared for this one. The GPS does not give up when you miss a turn. It does not shut down. It does not register frustration. It simply recalculates and finds another route to the same destination. Every missed sign this week was a recalculation. The divine navigation did not conclude that you were unreachable. It simply found another path to bring you to this moment. And this moment was always the destination. I want to share something with you before we go further. There is a person, I will not name them, who spent 9 months in what felt like complete spiritual freefall. Every sign they received, they dismissed. Every door that opened, they second-guessed. Every confirmation that arrived, they explained away. 9 months of what felt like wandering, and at the end of those 9 months, they made one decision. 40 days of deliberate stillness. No performing, no producing, no trying to manufacture the outcome they could feel approaching. Just stillness and trust, and the slow practice of remaining open. On day 39, a contact they had never reached out to called them, not about something small, about something that changed the entire trajectory of what they had been building toward for years. The breakthrough did not arrive because they had perfectly received every sign along the way. It arrived because they finally stopped running from their own stillness long enough for what had been in motion for months to catch up with them. They proved themselves in the quiet before they were promoted in public. That is the model for what is available to you on the other side of this season. Now, I want to speak to you about who you actually are, not who you have had to perform yourself as. Not the version of you that manages and maintains and keeps moving. The actual you, the one underneath all of that. You are a seer. You see what others walk past. You feel the undercurrent in the room before anyone else has registered that something is off. You notice what is not being said. You read the atmosphere of a situation before the situation has declared itself. This is not oversensitivity. This is not a disorder. This is a gift that was engineered into you because the people you are assigned to help will need someone who can see what they cannot see for themselves. You are a truth carrier. You cannot sustain a version of yourself that is not real. Pretending, performing, staying in places and roles that ask you to shrink these things exhaust you in a way they do not exhaust other people. And you have spent years thinking this was a weakness. It is not. The ones who carry truth cannot afford to be comfortable with falsehood, because the assignment they carry requires the integrity of someone who has not been corrupted by the comfort of pretending. You are a spiritual warrior. You have not broken. I want to name that plainly. The seasons you have been through, the ones that would have collapsed, someone with less architecture, you bent, but you did not break. That is not stubbornness. That is divine construction. The material of your life has been tested for load-bearing capacity, because what you will be asked to carry requires someone who has already proven they will not collapse under pressure. You are a voice. You feel things before they are spoken. You know what a room needs before the people in it can articulate what they are missing. You carry words that arrive before the understanding catches up, and when you finally speak them, something in the people around you releases, and they say, "That is exactly what I could not find the language for." That is not a coincidence. That is a calling wearing the shape of a gift. And you are a light bearer, not in the sense of performing brightness, in the sense that your presence changes the atmosphere of the spaces you enter, whether or not you are doing anything intentional to create that change. The reason certain conversations shift when you speak, the reason certain people are drawn to you in their most difficult moments, not always able to say why. The reason rooms feel different after you have been in them. You are not imagining that. You carry something that the world needs, and it is not small, and it was not given to you by accident. These are not names you are growing into. They are names you already carry. The claiming of them is not arrogance. The claiming of them is the act of alignment that activates what was always true. I want to lead you through something before we close this. I want you to, in your mind only, not out loud, not physically. I want you to imagine that you are standing at a door. This door is not new to you. You have circled it for a while. You have stood outside it without entering. You have told yourself you were not ready, or that the timing was off, or that the people you love needed you to stay on this side a little longer. Picture that door clearly. Now, I want you to imagine that on the other side of it is not a specific outcome or a specific achievement. On the other side is the version of you that has already passed through it. The version who said yes to the signs. The version who stopped dismissing the waking in the night and started listening. The version who honored the repeated thought instead of burying it. The version who trusted the silence and walked through the relationship shift and held their footing in the provision pressure. See that version of you. Now feel the 5 names settle into your body. The seer, the truth carrier, the warrior, the voice, the light bearer. Not as aspirations, not as things you are working toward, as things you already are. Standing at a door, you are finally ready to enter. You came into this message having missed 7 signs. You are leaving it as someone who now speaks the language they were sent in. Let me give you something practical to carry. Going forward, divine communication will arrive in 7 consistent forms. The interrupted sleep that holds something if you are still enough to receive it. The draining shift that is actually your discernment sharpening. The repeated thought that keeps pointing in the same direction. The silence that is building what noise could never build. The relationship reorganization that is clearing space for what is coming. The provision pressure that is testing your posture. And the 7th, the moment that arrives and recontextualizes the entire path that led to it. These 7 frequencies are the language. You know it now. And knowing the language changes how you experience everything that uses it. There is one more thing I want to say before we enter the closing of this. The worst thing you can do after receiving a revelation is rush to manufacture the outcome it points to. The impulse is understandable. You have received something significant, and your whole system wants to act on it immediately. But what was planted in this hour needs time to take root before it can bear weight. Trust the process of the growth more than the urgency of the outcome. Walk differently, perceive differently, respond differently. The external world will catch up to the internal shift, but not before the internal shift is real. Some of you will look back on this week, all 7 signs, including the ones you missed as the turning point you did not fully recognize while you were inside it. You will look back and say, that was the week everything changed, not because of a single dramatic moment, because of a series of quiet recalibrations that prepared you for a door you had been circling for a very long time. That door is behind you now. I want to close this the way it deserves to be closed. You stayed, and I do not want to move past that without acknowledging what it meant. In a world that has trained your attention to move every few seconds, in a week that has been pulling you in every direction, you chose to stay in this space for the duration of something that asked something of you. That is not a small act, that is a posture, and it is the same posture that receives everything else. You do not leave here empty. You leave carrying names you have always had. You leave carrying a language you have always needed. You leave carrying the awareness that the God who pursued you through 7 signs in 1 week is not done finding ways to reach you. So let me speak a blessing over you before you go. May the sign you almost missed become the foundation of the season you are entering. May the silence you endured give you the strength that only quiet can build. May the relationship that reorganized create space for the ones who speak the same language as the calling on your life. May the provision pressure you carried in private become the testimony you share in public. May the thought you kept dismissing become the assignment you walk in. May the calling you doubted become the ground you stand on. And may this moment right here, the moment you chose to stay, be the sign you never forget. Before I release you, I want to share one final word that I believe is being placed here for a specific person. I hear the Father saying, I found you this week. Not because you were looking perfectly, not because you received every sign I sent. I found you because I do not stop looking. I placed something in you before you had a name, and I have been protecting it through every season you were convinced I had forgotten about it. The signs were not tests you failed. They were steps I used to bring you here, and here is exactly where I needed you to be. You did not find this message. This message found you. Go well, chosen one. For those of you who felt the resonance of what Dr. Robert Lake discovered about the gamma frequency, about the gap between who you were built to be and who the noise of this world trained you to become. The link to the Genius song is in the pinned comment below this video. $39, 7 minutes a day. The full technology, the 4 bonuses, and the complete money-back guarantee. And remember, the only source that carries the genuine product with everything intact is that pinned link. Not a search engine, not a platform, only there. For those of you who recognized yourself in one or more of these 7 signs this week, let me know in the comments which sign arrived for you, not for me. For the person who is going to read that comment in their most private, most doubtful moment, and understand for the first time that they are not alone in what they are carrying. And if someone in your life has been moving through a season of spiritual dryness, someone who has been missing signs and does not know how to name what they are experiencing, you may be the 7th sign for them. If you feel led, send them this. What someone shares with you in your right moment has a way of becoming the message that changes everything.